Yeah. Okay. Who dropped Samantha? Yeah. Okay. All right. Yeah. All right. Yeah, I think we're down to 20. It started with 24. So, okay. All right. Okay. So I will do that for you. So Wednesday will be a review. Please bring your questions. All right. A test review doesn't mean tell us what's on the test. It's for you to ask me questions on stuff you're not quite sure about. All right. And then we'll do a group, effort on what you need to focus on. All right. Fair enough. And we'll go over any lab stuff that we need to cover on Wednesday. And then the test will be offered on Saturday. We'll go with the same thing from, say, 10 a.m. to 11:30 p.m. Everybody happy now? Yeah, exactly. You means tell us everything. Okay, all right. That's fine then. That's fine. All right, so we'll do that. We'll do that and send out. Yeah. Okay, Jennifer, what's up, Jennifer? Jennifer, you have a question? Your hand is up. Not anymore. Okay. All right. Okay. So no questions about respiratory? I'm shocked. That was some pretty hard stuff. Today's lecture is rather easy, to be honest with you, comparatively speaking, compared to the respiratory. What? We have 17 people here, so technically, yes. All right, I will record. Barely. So yeah, we have 17. Okay, so we are recording. So here we go. No other questions. Let's proceed. So, like I said, this one's nowhere near as complicated as the respiratory system, and it's pretty straightforward. And I'll fly through a lot of these slides. We should have an easy day today, because some of these are like really very intuitive. Like, I'm sure you all know what your teeth are for, and so I'm just going to fly through the stuff and just emphasize the stuff that's really important. All right. So. Christine wants to talk about the keto thing. Oh, don't even get me started. All right, we will get there. Okay. All right. We will talk about the keto thing. All right. Okay. So the digestive system. So again, a lot like the endocrine system, there's what we call the main tract, which is what we call the alimentary canal. So that's just basically the whole food passageway from your oral cavity all the way to your anal canal and everything in between. But the digestive system also has accessory organs, like I said, the teeth, the tongue, salivary glands, and of course the big three here are the liver, gallbladder, and pancreas. All right, and we know a little bit about the pancreas already and a little bit about the liver, not that much about the liver. So again, collectively, we call that the digestive system. The overview is very simple. So we take in our food, and once we swallow, it's automatic. After that, we have what's called peristalsis, which is our smooth muscle that's going to propel the food throughout the rest of the alimentary canal. We need to break down that food. So the initial mechanical thing is you chewing and stomach churning, and in the small intestine, moving it back and forth and shaking it up. And then we introduce the enzymes that break down all the large molecules. And just somebody humor me. So I eat a piece of steak, or if you wish, a chunk of ugly tasting bland tofu. What do I need to break it down to? My bar of tofu and my steak. I still need to break either one of them down into what? Come on. What do I need to break it down to before I can absorb it in my small intestine? Well, of course, chemical components. I want something more specific. Oh my goodness gracious, folks. Glucose? You eat a steak for the glucose?
So liquid?
No. Yeah, okay, Vanessa. Puts a true but arbitrary fact in there. Yeah, goes. Thank you, Diani. Thank you. Oh my God. Yeah, so steak and tofu are protein. I need to break that. Tofu or my pasta, and I have to break it down into what, Cindy? I picked on you for a purpose. Very good, glucose. All right, so that's what all that chemical digestion is. All right, and then we absorb it in the small intestine, and then eventually it's going to get to our cells, and whatever we can't break down, we eliminate through our defecation process. And somebody impress me and tell me, what can't we break down that we consume? Okay, Sarish is right. The rest of you guys are killing me. Oh my God, too much. We got too many comedians there. Yes, if you don't chew the corn, if you swallow the corn whole, then yes. And we'll talk a little bit about that. But yes, we don't. If you swallow your corn whole without. Stop it, Katie. I'm going to get to that story in a little bit. If you swallow your corn whole, the outer shell is cellulose. That's what which is the equivalent, as Suresh said, is fiber. And so if it's the whole kernel is intact, that cellulose protects it from your enzymes, so you don't digest it. So it goes right through the system. All right, stop. So yeah, if you want to go on a corn diet, yeah, you just eat corn, but don't chew it, just swallow it. And it's 0 calories. All right, God, that went way off track. All right, let's get back to the stuff here. So the organization is very simple. The mucosa, you've probably heard a dozen times, all right, and that's just the inner lining of the digestive system, or actually any hollow organ, all right? And for us, it's not going to have anywhere near the drastic changes as in the respiratory system. It's either going to be stratified squamous or it's going to be simple columnar. So that's not going to be a test question because that's pretty easy. And again, it should be pretty obvious when it's stratified squamous and when it's simple columnar, but we'll explain that. So we have the mucosa, and then right below that, ergo the submucosa, and that's where the action happens. All right, that's where we have our blood vessels, our nerves, you name it, where the reabsorption or absorption of our nutrients come from. Then we have the muscularis externa. That's the smooth muscle that's responsible for propelling the blood flow forward. And then the adventitia or serosa, which is basically just connective tissue that holds everything in place. All right, so there are changes. Again, this is all, whether it's the stomach or the intestines, it's still simple columnar, but we do have structural changes based on the function. So we have very different. If you look from the stomach to the intestine, you can see the different structural things there. And we'll talk about what we're looking at here in a minute. But again, all you need to know is mucosis, submucosis, the muscularis externa, and we're good. Don't worry about the lamina propria. That's just a basement membrane, and there's a small layer of muscle that's responsible for the stretching and contracting of the digestive system. So this slide will be on your lab practical. All right, very straightforward. Very straightforward. All right, very easy. Okay, all right. I mentioned mesentery a long time ago when we talked about arteries. So again, the mesentery is your peritoneum. All right, these are your serous membranes, and it just holds everything in place. All right. So this mesentery, it shows you a little bit over here, just holds all your small intestines, large intestine, stomach, right where they should be. All right. And yes, if you gain weight, that's where the fat is deposited, in the mesentery. All right. Beautiful. This is a horrible slide. They don't explain what's going on there. So right here on the left, you see that this is the mesentery. It's holding the stomach in place. For the stomach, they have specific names, which will be on your lab practical. So you have the lesser and greater omentum. And again, that's just an apron that holds the stomach right where it needs to be. This slide is weird because they basically have kind of like cut the greater omentum. I don't know. It takes a while to figure out what the heck they did here. so you have the lesser one that's in the inner curvature, and then the greater omentum is on the outside. Okay. Yeah, exactly, Nada. It was lifted up, but they don't explain to you in the textbook that was lifted up. So you're staring at it going, what the, because if I'm looking at that, that's pretty much covering your stomach over. So yeah, it was lifted up for some bizarre reason. So, but again, you don't need to know any of this transverse mesocolon. Just know the mesentery holds everything together, and then for the stomach per se, it's the greater and lesser omentum. All right, not going to talk about this. All right, we all know we have an oral cavity. The hard palate is where the bone is, and then soft is just the tissue there. You do need to know a little bit. What is the function of the uvula? Anybody know why you had that little dingly thing in the back of your throat? That's your gag reflex. Very good, Andrea. Yeah. So yeah, we say it's for the gag reflex, but what it helps with is when the food brushes along that helps with the reflex for the epiglottis covering up the trachea. All right. But yes, on that occasion where you have to throw up, you stick your finger in your throat and you push on that uvula, and that happens. Okay. All right. I'm not going to talk about this. Everybody should know what our tongue and our teeth are for. So there's nothing in here that I want you to know. All right. I do expect you to know the basics of the salivary glands. We have the very large one, the parotid. All right. The back of your cheek there. Sublingual, again, lingual meaning tongue, so below your tongue. And the submandibular, which again, we all know what a mandible is. And of course, saliva is all about, basically emulsifying the food. It does have some enzymes to begin with. The most important one is salivary amylase that helps you break down your carbohydrates, your potato. All right. But again, mostly it's just moistening the food up, trying to dissolve it before it goes to the stomach. All right. But the key there is a salivary amylase. We're going to start breaking down our carbs right at the oral cavity before it even gets to the stomach. Any questions so far? And you know what the sublingual salivary gland is famous for? And I just learned this term not too many years ago, but we've all experienced it. I'm sure almost all of us have experienced. Katie, let somebody answer. Does everybody know what Katie's talking about? All right, Katie, explain them. Katie explains what gleeking is.
Yeah, I shot my dentist in the face once. He was not happy about it.
Okay,
He laughed.
all right.
It was over.
We've all done this. Everybody's done this. They just didn't know it was called gleeking. And I don't know if that's a real word or not, but that's what people. But you know, when you yawn sometimes and little saliva squirts out of your mouth? Everybody's done that. Everybody's done that. You yawn, and next thing you know, you got a little a little squirt. And that was from your. Yeah, I didn't either till, like I said, that just a couple of years ago. But yeah, so when you yawn, it puts pressure on your your sublingual salivary gland, and it squirts. All right, enough of that silliness. Let's move on. All right. I'm not going to ask you anything about teeth. Obviously, who's my dental hygienist aspirants? Cindy, Daniel, and Sarish. All right. Well, you're going to get more than you want to know about the teeth when you get to your school, so I don't need to cover that right now. All right. So a little bit more anatomy. Pharynx, oropharynx, and laryngopharynx. You've already seen these terms before. All right. That was part of the respiratory process as well. All right. And once again, it's stratified squamous. Why? That's not good enough, Christina, to say food. What about food? All right, Bucola. That's good. Abrasions, frictions. Yeah, scraping off. Very good, Suresh. Very good. So yes, every time you eat, you scrape off several layers of your own epithelial tissue. And you digest it. All right. And this is just fun. And why this is applicable is the fact that, because we talked about ventilators, the problem with the ventilator for somebody that has lung disease or COVID is we stick a tube down your throat and into your trachea, and now you can't swallow. And swallowing is a reflex, all right? It's reflex. You say go, and it happens. You don't coordinate all the muscle groups involved. And this is pretty amazing if you think about it, right? So if you do come off the ventilator, you're going to have to learn to swallow again. You're going to have a therapist that's going to start out, really tiny with sips of water until that reflex comes back. As we say, use it or lose it. And you don't use it on a ventilator. So this is just fun to watch. Oh gosh, I don't know if this is going to work. Tell me if it works. Sometimes it flashes. Good. Watch this. This is so cool to me.
Recording. Okay, video off. Recording.
And right here is the epiglottis, and watch how it closes. See how cool that is?
Recording.
And that's going down your esophagus. Cool.
You now follow it down, please. And back up. Okay, video off.
So yeah, so they do this when people are learning how to swallow after being intubated.
Back up. Up, up, up. Video off. Recording.
How cool is that?
Video off. Recording. Swallow. Okay, and forward. Look forward. Swallow again. Okay, video off. Recording.
Anyway, I really wanted to see you watch this epiglottis right here. Here's your epiglottis. And you can see it just snaps shut as soon as he swallows. That's a reflex. Boom. See how that closed right here? Okay. Anyway, cool stuff. Cool stuff. That's just an x-ray. All right. So, but and they make them drink something that has a dye in it, so it's very obvious. Yeah, I was going to say some sort of dye. Yeah, but they're drinking something. Yeah, they're drinking. And again, that's if you've been ventilated, that's what you're going to do. You're just going to drink some small sips of fluid until you get that reflex back. All right. So once we swallow, we get to the esophagus. There's not a whole lot of interesting things about the esophagus, really. It just connects your throat to the stomach that we're going to get to in a little bit. And let me talk about this cardiac sphincter in a little bit. It's kind of a misnomer, but again, nothing huge. Again, it's going to be stratified squamous because it's food. It's going to cause abrasion and friction. All right. Beautiful. And again, nothing changes. Again, adventitia, don't worry about that. That's just the connective tissue. We don't care. All right. So now that you swallowed and it's heading through the esophagus, we have movement. We call basically motility. All right. You have two types of contractions: the tonic, which means it's sustained, and those are your sphincters. And again, a sphincter in anatomy just means a circular smooth muscle that contracts and stops flow of whatever, or dilates and opens up and allows whatever stuff we're talking about to flow through. Then we have the phasic contractions, and those are rhythmic things. Those are your peristalsis, and those are moving your food along. Now, don't get too concerned about this. I don't make a big deal out of this, but your smooth muscle, like I said, no, I haven't said it before. This is the first time you hear it. Your digestive system works autonomously. It does not need any input from the central nervous system, none whatsoever. It's even got its own nerve network. All right. That's why we can keep somebody that is technically brain dead alive as long as we provide them with food, because the digestive system will work without the brain involved. So the smooth muscles kind of are a little bit like an autorhythmic cell in the heart. You have these pacemaker cells that kind of slowly depolarize up and down, and then boom, a stimulus triggers them. All right. That stimulus can be stretching of the smooth muscle because you ate something and now you have food in there. it could be a signal from your parasympathetic. Remember, parasympathetic, rest and digest. So we can get input from the parasympathetic that can trigger that. Chemical changes can trigger that. You eat something, it changes the pH in the composition of the environment within the stomach and digestive system, and that will trigger these to actually reach threshold and depolarize. And then we have our muscle contractions, which is, again, our peristalsis, which is just moving the food forward. All right. Yeah, and I'm going to use a couple names. When you eat something, we call it food stuff. When it's in a nice little neat little ball and you swallow, we call it a bolus. And then I'll get another name change in a little bit here. So peristalsis happens throughout your digestive system. But when it gets to the small intestine, we need time for the small intestine to go to work, breaking down those proteins to amino acids and the carbs to glucose. So we have this rocking back and forth motion, which is just a stalling to let the enzymes do their thing, and it's called segmentation. All right, we get to the stomach. Here's a good anatomy slide. So pretty much everything on this slide is going to be on your lab practical. All right, so we have regions, the cardia. Now, earlier I mentioned the cardiac sphincter, but it's not really a sphincter by definition. Where was that? That was in the esophagus. All right. You see this term cardiac sphincter. Well, again, it's not a true sphincter because it's not a round circular muscle, but it is able to close off so food doesn't go back up into the esophagus once it's in the stomach. If you have food in here and it's being digested and that food stuff goes back up there, what do we call that? That's the simple name is heartburn. Well, regurgitation, no. All right, I didn't say you vomited. It doesn't have to vomit, but if it just goes out of the stomach, we can call that the reflux. GERD, Christina, what's GERD stand for? I'm not sure if I get that. I don't know everything. What is GERD, Christina? What does it stand for? Gastrointestinal reflux. Oh, all right. It doesn't have to be a disease, though. We all had a little bit of heartburn here. Maybe if you ate too much or you ate and drank too much and you get the heartburn. And again, that's a disorder. But we're just talking about everybody has. No, that's fine. Everybody gets heartburn once in a while. You overdid it. And now a little bit of this stuff in the stomach came up through the stomach, and the difference that we're going to explain in just a little bit is the stomach lining is coated with mucus, so the acid that's in your stomach is not affected or does not hurt the cells, but you don't have that mucus in the esophagus. So that heartburn is the actual acid. Yeah, Thanksgiving is a good example. So that heartburn is the actual acid from your stomach that now is back up into your esophagus. All right, so again, the cardia, which would include the cardiac sphincter. Well, again, I still resent that. And then we have the fundus, and the fundus is a generic word. Your uterus has a fundus. Anything that's just kind of arched right here is the fundus, all right? And then, of course, the body, that's a no-brainer. And then the pylorus is the region, and then you have the pyloric sphincter, and that's a true sphincter. That's, as you can see, there's smooth muscle right there, and that will close off until your small intestine is ready to take the food stuff that's in the stomach, all right? You also have what are called rugae, and those are the folds in the stomach, all right? There's two things that does. It allows for increased surface area, but also that's for stretching. So if you eat Thanksgiving dinner and you overdo it, then all those rugae will stretch out and flatten It'll be nice and smooth. If you haven't eaten it for a while, then you'll see those nice rugae in there. So I expect you to know those basic parts, all right? All right, so the function of the stomach is basically it receives the food, it holds it, we start the chemical processes, mainly breaking down proteins, all right? So we have a specific enzyme called pepsin, whose job is to take that steak that you chewed up or the tofu and take those proteins and start breaking them down into polypeptides, or just small strands of amino acids. Don't worry about the intrinsic factor and the vitamin D12. I'm not going to ask you that. But ultimately, when we started this digestive process, this should be liquefied. This should be liquefied. All right. And so when it's time, this pyloric sphincter will open and deliver the foodstuffs. And now we get a new name change to chyme. All right, so the food that enters the small intestine is called chyme. It should be all liquefied, except for what that we've already established. Okay, good. Yeah, except for the corn that you swallowed without chewing it. Right. And then the other thing that you may have bolus foodstuffs chyme. Yeah. All right. But the raisin thing, Katie brought up is because of a little story I told. This is a little anecdotal thing. So when my son was born, and he was probably, I don't know, a year. God, it's hard to remember. He started eating a little bit of solid food, so I would give him raisins, which he seemed to love. He would gobble them up. But then, when I went to change his diapers, what was in his diapers? They weren't raisins anymore. This is all physiological, good stuff. Exactly, Samantha. Grapes. Exactly. And that's physiology. That's osmosis. He swallowed the raisin whole. The digestive system couldn't break down the cellulose, but water could still go in. And then again, water goes from low solute concentration to high. The raisin is all sugar. And so you get grapes. That's a true thing. Okay. Oh my goodness. All right. We'll move on. So again, let's talk about the stomach, the anatomy here. Again, we have the same three layers. The epithelium now is simple columnar and will be all the way until we get to the anal canal, where again, that's talking about abrasion through defecation. Everything else really simple squamous. All right. What's unique about the stomach is it has 3 layers of smooth muscle. So we can have maximum motility. All right. So we have an oblique layer, a circular layer, and a longitudinal layer. So we got one that's going up and down, one that goes around, and one that goes sideways, or slanted, I should say. And that gives me maximum motility and movement. All right. Within the stomach, we have these gastric pits right here. And inside these are the cells that provide us what, and this is a true term, believe it or not, we get gastric juice. It's literally called juice. All right. And that includes all the secretions from several different cells, which is a very important study slide that I'm going to talk about here in a second. All right. So we have the mucous neck cells that secrete mucus. That's to protect the lining, the mucosa, from the hydrochloric acid, which is produced by the parietal cells. All right. So this is a study slide, folks. I'm telling you that right now. All right. So that will produce the hydrochloric acid, which is used to denature the proteins, break them down. The chief cells produce pepsinogen, and the active version of this is pepsin. And again, it's one of those things like we learned when we talk about blood. In our nomenclature for biochemistry, when you have the O-gin, that's the inactive form. And when you take off the O-gin, just like fibrinogen to fibrin. So pepsinogen becomes pepsin, and this is an enzyme that's going to help break down those proteins. Then we have a big name here called an enteroendocrine cell. Entero refers to the digestive system. All right. Endocrine means what? Where is these products going? Somebody. They're not going into the stomach. The products of these cells are going where? Exactly. They're going into the bloodstream. So they're going in the opposite direction. Good. So the mucus, parietal, and chief cells, their products will go into the stomach. The endocrine cells are going to produce things that are going to go into the submucosa, into the bloodstream. They are regulatory, and we'll explain those in a little bit. Okay. So regulation of gastric secretion. We have 3 phases. Cephalic refers to your head, gastric, stomach, intestinal. That's a no-brainer. So there are 3 slides here. I'm going to skip all 3 and go to this one because this is just summarizes it, right? And this is another test question. I'm telling you, it's a test question, all right? And again, we're talking about regulating activity. So we have stimulating events and inhibitory events, all right? So the cephalic, again, we're talking about your head, your brain. And so this is just the sight and thought of food, smell. Those are going to stimulate what you would, the term everybody's used before is get your juices flowing. And that's what we're talking about. That's going to stimulate the stomach to produce that gastric juice. So again, here's your excitatory things. Your inhibitory is whatever makes you lose your appetite. Whatever makes you lose your appetite. So that could be anything. Do not worry about these pathways. I'm not going to ask you about the vagus nerve or the medulla that's over the top. All right, we don't need that. So we go to the gastric phase, and again, what stimulates the stomach is stretch, distension. You have food in your stomach, as well as the chemicals that you took in, the proteins, the peptides. Caffeine is a huge stimulant for your digestive system. Rising pH. We want the pH of the stomach to be 2, 1.5 to 2 on the pH scale. Again, to break down the proteins. All right. But if you eat a bunch of foods that may be basic or alkaline, that's going to stimulate the stomach to produce more acid. So what's the point of drinking these alkaline drinks? In fact, they still sell alkaline water. Ugh. Very good, Saresh. No use. Why would, and that's it, Christine. Why would you want it basic? Your stomach doesn't want it basic. So if you drink an alkaline drink, your stomach's going to go, why did you do that? Now I got to make more acid. All right. So it makes no purpose whatsoever to drink an alkaline drink. All right. Because your stomach's going to turn around and lower that pH to get it where it's supposed to be. All right, so those are the stimulatory events, things that will inhibit the stomach. Yeah, it's just marketing, just another gimmick of the millions that you will see in your life. What's going to be inhibitory is if the pH is too low, all right? Again, we don't want it to go below 2 because we don't want to burn a hole in our stomach. That would be called a what?
Ulcer?
An ulcer. An ulcer. Very good. you're producing too much acid below 2, then yes, you can again literally digest the mucosa of your stomach, and that's an ulcer, and that's very painful. Yes, Christine, it is. From eating hot Cheetos. Okay, whatever it takes. Too funny. All right. All right. And then, of course, there's still got a little emotional upset, although I think this is kind of weird because that should be up there with the cephalic phase. But anyway, and then the last one is intestinal phase. All right. And again, the small intestine is kind of like the quality control of the stomach. All right. So if the pH, oh gosh, dang it. All right, here is, I always forget. I need to see if they've updated this. This is where the editors failed. Everybody pay attention. Everybody with me? Okay. On the intestinal phase, under stimulatory, it says the presence of low pH. It's the opposite. It's the opposite. All right. If you had a low pH, you wouldn't want to stimulate the stomach anymore. So it should say the presence of a high pH. A high pH. All right. So this low, editor didn't catch that. All right. The pH is low. You certainly don't want the stomach to get any more excited. So that should be high. More importantly, yeah. If your stomach didn't do a good job of breaking down the food, all right, we don't want anything, we don't want any lumps in there, all right? We want it to be a liquid, we want it to be kind. And then we can talk about the other myths in life. What did your elementary teacher tell you about gum? Why? And yeah, like Joshua. Deani, that's exactly the actual one that I heard. But yes, Christina is right. They said it would stay there for 7 years. And of course, you knew that was to scare you so you wouldn't swallow your gum if you got caught in class chewing gum. You all know that now, right? that gum that you swallowed did not stay in your stomach for 7 years. That was a lie. Yes, you have been lied to. You were lied to just to scare you to not chew gum. Watermelon seeds, Joshua, are the same thing as corn, all right? If you swallow watermelon seeds, then they're going to come out as watermelon seeds on the other end. All right. Yeah, they're not going to grow in your stomach. All right. And while we're on this subject, then there's the other scam, and that is the what do they call a colonic, the detox, where they stick something up your how you doing and cleanse you out. How many have heard of those things? The way they would scare you, say you have all this undigested meat in your yeah. Well, that's one of those gimmicky health things where like, hey, you have all this undigested meat in your digestive system, so we're going to flush it all out. That's not a thing. That's not a thing. There's no such thing as undigested meat in your small or large intestine. All right. Christina, very clever. All right. So yeah, some myths busted. So don't fall for, hey, we need to clean your intestines out by shoving up a hose there. I heard meat is a big part of diabetes. Not really. No. All right. Being obese is a big part of diabetes, but that whatever gets you obese, that could be just whatever, desserts. All right, but no. Yeah. Okay, where was I? Okay, so yeah, so we don't want any partially digested food. The small intestine will say, hey, you're not doing your job, stomach. All right. And then the last thing, and this is for all of them, distension. So once that chyme, now it's called chyme because it's in your small intestine, and that's going to expand the small intestine. That's what distension means. And if there's a lot of fats in there, or if it's acidic, or we have partially digested food, we're going to tell the stomach to stop what it's doing because now I have to work on what you gave me. All right. And so this key thing here is the fats. Fats are hard to digest, or they take a long time to digest. So if you ate a really fatty thing like, oh, I don't know, to me, the most gross thing, although it tastes delicious, but from a health point, there's nothing worse for you than fried mozzarella sticks with ranch dressing. It doesn't get any worse than that. All right. That's probably the worst thing you could do to yourself. So no fried chicken before the bed. That's gonna, yeah, air fried. Okay, beautiful. All right, we're done with that. This is just a GWIS slide. There's nothing in here. It's just kind of, because when I was a kid and they said there's hydrochloric acid in your stomach, well, as a kid, when you heard of hydrochloric acid, you're like, oh, that's what they use in the monster movies, and they throw the hydrochloric acid and they burn somebody. So I'm like, how is that in my stomach? But again, you have the mucus in there. And again, look at our favorite reaction. H2O plus CO2 gives me carbonic acid. I take the hydrogen ion and I throw it in the stomach along with the chloride. Boom, and I have hydrochloric acid. Again, this is just a GWIS slide. Don't spend any time on that. All right. Okay. Again, once I've got my stomach to produce the chyme from the foodstuffs, all right. Like I said before, carbohydrate rich, like rice, goes quickly. Fat takes a lot longer, and we'll explain why in a little bit. Nothing really big there. Okay, we're going to take a little departure because we're going to have to be talking these. So there's several hormones, and these will also be on your test, and we'll put them all together. So gastrin is released to excite your stomach. We want to increase the secretion of HCl and pepsinogen. It also increases that gastric motility. All right. So it's excitatory. And that will be released, again, in the presence of proteins and caffeines and whatnot. Secretin, and this all makes sense in the following slides, all right? This is produced by the small intestine, specifically the duodenum or duodenum, and this is going to inhibit gastric activity, all right? And I'll explain that in a little bit. It will inhibit the stomach, but it will excite the pancreas, all right, to produce sodium bicarbonate, all right? And again, here's a unique thing. The stomach wants a pH of 2. The small intestine wants a pH of 8. So I have to neutralize and basically get that chyme up above 7 because the small intestine doesn't have that nice coating of mucus on it. The liver will also produce sodium bicarbonate in the bile, which we'll talk about in a little bit. And I'll explain the CCK here in just a second, so just hold that thought. All right. CCK, cholecystokinin. So let me say it again. Cholecystokinin is, again, something that inhibits the stomach, but it excites the pancreas and the gallbladder. And then glucose-independent peptide is just another hormone that stimulates the pancreas to release insulin, because we know that there's going to be glucose available as soon as we digest those carbs. Beautiful. Okay, so a little bit more about the stomach is, again, we start the initial digestion of food in the stomach, but there's no absorption or active absorption. The only thing that's going to be absorbed are things that are lipid soluble, that is going to pass right through all the membranes that make up the stomach. All right? So, one of the worst things you can do, and you have to learn this as the hard way as a teenager, is to drink alcohol on an empty stomach. Alcohol, you drink the alcohol, it doesn't have to go into the rest of your digestive system. That alcohol is going to go right through the membranes of your stomach. Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yes, I meant 21. Yeah. I meant 20. That's the ticket. Yeah. Okay. You have to remember, I'm old enough where there was a time when you could buy alcohol at 18. Okay. All right. So yeah, so if you have an empty stomach and you drink alcohol, that's going to go right into your bloodstream immediately. So you may feel good for a little while, but then you're going to be like, oh my God, what have I done? So always eat something before you imbibe, if you imbibe. All right. Any questions so far? All right, let's move on to the small intestine. And again, this is where the action happens. All right. We're going to be producing lots of enzymes. We're going to be controlling the stomach's activity. And ultimately, we're going to absorb our nutrients. So for anatomy purposes, you have three sections: the duodenum, which is by far the most important, the little blue shade here. Then the jejunum, the midsection, and then the ileum. All right. And then at the end of the ileum, we have a sphincter that's going to go into the large intestine called the ileocecal sphincter. Ileocecal sphincter. So that's pretty much an anatomy slide there. So the duodenum, like I said, this is where the action happens. Here's my duodenum. And it's going to get secretions from the pancreas. And again, we call this pancreatic juice. And it's going to have enzymes, and it's going to have a sodium bicarbonate. The gallbladder right here is going to introduce bile, that we'll explain in a second, into the small intestine. All right, so this is a good anatomy lab practical slide. I expect you to know the main pancreatic duct, and we'll talk a little bit more about the bile duct and the awesome name of hepatopancreatic ampulla and sphincter. Remember, ampulla just means a little bit of a swelling or enlargement. All right. So the small intestine has a couple of microscopic differences. Again, this is all about surface area, because this is where the absorption is going to take place. So the more surface area, the more I can absorb. Your intestines are very, very efficient. So you have large folds that are sort of kind of like plicae. Rugae in the stomach. Folds of the small intestine called plicae circularis. Right? And again, these are folds that go around the lumen of the small intestine. Then we have villi, which are the fingers here. and then microvilli. The microvilli are little fingers that are actually on the cell itself. It's actually part of the cell membrane. All right. So all that increases our surface area for absorption. All right. And the lacteals, this was briefly mentioned in the lymphatic system, but the lacteals are the ones that they flow through the villi, and they are the ones that are going to absorb the fats. And that's part of your lymphatic system. So again, like the stomach, you have cells that are all responsible for absorbing the amino acids, the glucose, the fructose, the lipids. Goblet cells that are going to provide the lubrication. There's enteroendocrine cells. That's what the whole business of the secretin and the CCK and the GIP were. All right. And we call them intestinal crypts, the equivalent to the gastric pits in there. Don't worry about this. I'm not going to ask you any of this stuff right here. All right. Don't worry about it. Not a big deal. Very little known there. So again, the big hormones that the duodenum releases are these right here. So there's a couple test questions on these hormones. All right. And again, they work together. So here's a pretty picture for you to look at. So you have food in your stomach. It gets into the small intestine. Now we call it chyme. The duodenum, with those enteroendocrine cells, are going to release secretin, which is going to excite the pancreas to produce the pancreatic juice. The CCK is going to get the gallbladder to eject the bile. And again, it's just a little bit confusing. So secretin is going to excite the exocrine pancreas, and at the same time, secretin is going to get the liver to produce the bile. All right. And CCK will also excite the pancreas, and will also excite the bladder. All right. Both secretin and CCK are going to inhibit gastric activity because we got chyme in there. So it's like, hey, we have chyme. We need to process this. So stomach, just back off and wait till we're done. And of course, the GIP is going to get the pancreas to release insulin and be prepared for absorbing glucose into the cells. All right. The liver, you can spend a whole semester on the liver and barely touch it. For anatomy purposes, it's really super easy. All right. You have a right and left lobe. You have a caudate, referring to the rear tail, and quadrate, referring to four, like a square. All right. And again, we don't have enough time to cover everything that the liver does, but for digestive purposes, it's all about, like somebody said earlier, it gets first dubs at whatever you ingested from the hepatic portal system, but it also produces the bile. All right. And so here's a pretty slide. So the liver will produce the bile. We have our right and left hepatic ducts. They will emerge into the common hepatic duct. Obviously, if you have a right and left, you know you're going to have a common. All right. And then that will merge with the cystic duct. That's the duct that's coming from the gallbladder. And then that will be introduced into the small intestine. All right. So for lab practical purposes, I expect you to know the common duct and the cystic duct. Beautiful. As far as functions, there's a zillion functions. One for this course for digestion is producing the bile. But like I said, it also is going to first dubs. I think I mentioned this before, but your cells can't use fructose. Where am I going to get a lot of fructose in my diet? table sugar, which is sucrose. So sucrose is glucose plus fructose. Your digestive system, your small intestine is going to break that into glucose and fructose. The glucose will be absorbed and go directly to your body cells. The fructose your body cells can't use, so that will go to liver, and the liver can actually convert that into glucose, which is kind of interesting if you think about it. All right. Again, this fat storage, that's not really that important, and neither is detoxification. But of course, for most of the drugs, and including alcohol, your liver has these skills, the ability to break that down into things that aren't toxic, and then you'll get rid of those through the liver or through the kidneys that we'll explain later. And lots of different plasma proteins, all right, including things that we have already talked about, like our angiotensinogen. Any questions so far? Okay. So bile, what's the purpose of bile? It's an emulsifier. Who knows what an emulsifier means? Most of your salad dressings have an emulsifier. Well, not just digest. Break it down. Oh my God, Christina used the word it. I don't even know it. It. The it word. Okay, Natalia comes up with dissolve, which is close. If you put that together with Christina, fat. All right. So emulsifier is a substance that allows water and fat to mix. Because hopefully we all know water is polar, fat's nonpolar, so they don't associate, they don't mix together. But an emulsifier, and again, we're going to keep this simple. Don't worry about any of this stuff down here. A emulsifier is a go-between. It has a hydrophobic side and a hydrophilic side. So again, the hydrophobic will take a fat molecule, and the hydrophilic will take a water molecule. And so again, I don't know if you guys pay much attention to your calories and your diet, but for a gold star, what percent of your average ranch or blue cheese dressing is fat? Okay, that's a little extreme, folks. It's a little extreme. About 70% to 80%. All right. It's between 70 and 80%. Of course, you don't see the fat because it has an emulsifier in there. So it's dissolved with the water that's in there as well. But yes. So I always joke with people. It's like, I went on a diet and I didn't lose any weight. And I'm like, what were you eating? I ate nothing but salads. And I'm like, yeah, how much salad dressing did you put on there? Because if you put like 3 tablespoons of salad dressing on your salad, then that's a Big Mac. That's the equivalent of a Big Mac in terms of calories. All right. Let's move on. So I just want you to get the bile as an emulsifier for when you ingest fats. So you eat a big fatty meal of those fried mozzarella sticks, and your bile is your gallbladder is going to release bile to emulsify that in your stomach. All right. So again, yeah, the buffalo blue cheese chicken salad is 2,000 calories. Yeah, if people don't know that, so like I just ate salads and I didn't lose any weight. That is so true. I've heard that so many times. Okay. So the gallbladder is just storing the bile. The liver produced the bile, but it was stored in the gallbladder. And then when I get my CCK, it's going to cause the gallbladder to contract and releasing the bile into the duodenum. Beautiful. So again, CCK and secretin work together. Secretin gets the liver to produce the bile. CCK gets the gallbladder to release the bile. And that's just a pretty slide that says just that. Okay, we already know a lot about the pancreas. Hopefully, we all know about the insulin and glucagon, so I don't have to talk about the endocrine aspect of it. But again, its exocrine function is, once again, to produce that pancreatic juice, which contains a bunch of different enzymes to break down your foodstuffs, your chyme, I guess I should say. Okay. Man, this is just another reiteration of what I just said. And this is always thrown in there as a qualifier. Remember, the vagus nerve is the efferent pathway from your parasympathetic for digestion. So it always influences everything you do as well. All right. So again, this is just a review there. Any questions? All right. So again, chyme enters duodenum. Carbohydrates, easy. Proteins, easy. Fats, not so much. All right. So it takes a little while. Okay. So the question is, what causes gallstones? And this is common. And usually you don't get these two. You get, but these are just like pebbles, all right, that get stuck in your gallbladder or your bile ducts. And again, it's typically your diet. We don't really understand completely, and I'm just saying that because I know my father had them, and I'm like, oh my God, that sounds horrible. But basically, the gallbladder is not emptying completely, so you have crystallization of several different minerals, all right? But not to go into an extraordinary deep, but there's actually several different types of gallstones, all right? There's several different types. So yeah, no, it's a good question, but like I said, that's a whole science unto itself. And like I said, I was studying this stuff not too long ago, but there's like 4 or 5 different classifications of gallstones based on what the major composition is. Are they more mineral? Are they more fats? So it's just one of those things where, no, good question, because people get them, and I know that they're very, very painful, to be sure. To be sure. All right. How did you know your cat had gallstones anyway? Did you take them in for? Did he tell you? Did your cat tell you he had gallstones? Did your cat tell you his gallbladder hurts? He stopped peeing. Okay, there you go. All right. So you sure those weren't kidney stones, Christine? I think you're confusing gallstones with kidney stones. 2 different things.
Oh, maybe it was kidney stones. It had something to do with not being able to pee.
Yeah, that's kidney stones. All right, gallstones, that's your gallbladder. Kidney stones, yeah, because they get lodged into your uterine tubes, which we'll talk about next week, and then you can't pee. Yeah, and that should be an obvious sign. Like I said, I was just curious because I don't know how a cat would know it had gallstones or what the symptoms would be, but stop peeing, yeah, that's a kidney stone, and his uterine tubes were all clogged up. All right, and we'll talk more about that. You can pick up your cat when we get to the kidneys. All right. All right. And again, like I said, people always ask this question. None of you asked, but sometimes you have to have your gallbladder removed for whatever reasons. And the only thing that affects is your digestion of fats. So typically the docs will say, if you have your gallbladder removed, you just got to back off eating fatty foods, which is a healthy thing. But it's not a big thing, because without a gallbladder, all you do is have a slow drip of bile because your liver is still going to produce it. I almost did. Okay, you almost did? All right. Okay, let's get to a little bit of the control. And again, there's nothing on this slide you need to worry about. So just scratch this out. All right. The large intestine, it's really got one giant job, and that is to absorb all the water. You had this chyme, it was liquefied. That was liquefied so you could digest it, get the enzymes in there. Once I've got all the nutrients I can, and I can't digest the rest, I want that water back. So I'll extract all the water, good old-fashioned osmosis, and compact the rest of what's left into feces. Okay. And then you have this thing, and this is just a gee whiz thing here, right here. You have this mutual benefit. Your large intestine, especially that appendix, which we talked about earlier, has billions and billions of bacteria in there. And the bacteria are harmless as long as they stay in the large intestine in the appendix. All right. But the bacteria that's in there is happy living there because they get plenty of food. What do they eat? Anybody? Come on, it's an easy question. They eat stuff that you couldn't digest, which is the fiber, the cellulose, the bran, whatever you want to call it. Bacteria have the enzymes to break down cellulose. And so they have fun with that. And they produce the vitamins. So you're like, here's your bran or your fiber, and thank you for the vitamins. So a good thing. All right. This is your anatomy. Every one of these will be on your test. All right. Really simple. You have the ascending colon going up, transverse colon going across, descending, and then the sigmoid. Remember what I told you, the sigmoid means S shape. All right. Some unique structures. You have what is called a Tenier coli. You're going to probably screw that up when you spell that on the test, to be sure. But again, the Tenier coli is a band of muscle that goes along the small intestine. And when it contracts, it forms pouches called haustra. Haustra are the pouches that you see there. Okay. The cecum, I don't know why it got its own name, but this is just the very, very, very lowest part of the ascending colon. And then there's our appendix. And then again, I mentioned this earlier, from your ileum, the third part of your small intestine enters the large intestine through the ileocecal valve. Ileocecal valve. And that'll be on your test. All right. This is not going to be on your test. In fact, don't even worry about this slide. I don't care. All right. And then we have the rectum. This is where the feces will end up. And if you have enough in there, it's going to stretch and stretch. And then that's going to be a reflex, an autonomic reflex to your CNS. It says, okay, time to get rid of this. And then we're going to contract the rectum, relax our internal anal sphincters, and we can go to the bathroom. If it's not appropriate to go to the bathroom at that particular time, your fail-safe is your external sphincter. So you have the external sphincters that say, no, 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 wait, 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 as you squint your butt and run to a bathroom. All right. So the internal you have no control over. That's a reflex. The externals you do. And of course, you can control them to some extent. All right. So again, this is a more elaborate thing. And I will ask you to explain this. All right. So again, feces piles up here, stretches, stretch receptors send a signal. I'm going to have our contraction of the smooth muscle. I'm going to relax the internal sphincter, and then external sphincter, i.e. keyword there, it is skeletal muscle, so you indeed have control over that. Any questions? All right, here's the regulation part. It's not hard, folks. I'm going to keep this real easy. Again, your key stimuli are chemicals and stretch. All right. This right here is your only study slide for that. It's easy. Gosh. All right. So like I said before, your GI tract has its own nerve networks that are autonomous. They work without any influence from the CNS. All right. So most of the time it's intrinsic or local. You have a stimulus, which again are chemicals. So you have chemoreceptors, osmoreceptors, mechanoreceptors. So you got stretch, osmolarity, i.e. salty food, chemo, your caffeine, whatnot. And you have this thing called the enteric nerve plexus. And that will immediately affect the smooth muscle and glands that will again cause my motility and secretory activity. So these are your short reflexes. However, they can be influenced by the central nervous system, i.e. sight, smell, taste, thought of food. Everybody got that? It is really simple. Don't make it any more complicated than that. All right? The two nerve plexuses are the submucosal and myenteric. All right? And again, one's for regulating glandular activity. In the smooth muscle, that's the first layer that I really didn't emphasize. They are responsible for the plicae circularis and the rugae. The myenteric one is the one that actually controls your peristalsis. So this is the study slide. Mark it. All right. And this one is just another version. I thought I'd give you a couple different versions of the same thing. All right. Okay, to wrap this up, absorption, really simple. We already know about all our different ways. We have diffusion through the phospholipid bilayer for things that are lipid soluble, polar or nonpolar. We have things that may need a carrier or channel. To a much lesser degree, we can do a little bit of endocytosis and a lot of active transport pumps. So all you need to tell me, really, all this is way more than you need to know. You just need to know for carbohydrates, you use a co-transport system with the sodium potassium pump, our best friend. All right, we pump the sodium out, it wants to come back in. When sodium comes back in, it drags glucose and galactose with it. All right. Again, just for gee whiz, this is not important. Fructose doesn't need active transport because a lot of your food has fructose in it. All right, so there's not a gradient or to work against, because again, I told you about high fructose corn syrup, right? Let I explain what that is? No? Christina says no, maybe. Because you don't remember. Anybody else got anything to say? The backup, Christina. Crickets? Nothing? I like to bust rumors. We all know that high fructose corn syrup is evil, right? Is no one talking to him anymore? Very bad. It's horrible, right? It's the most evil thing. You'll die, right? That's what they say. Exactly, Joshua. All right, so I need to bust this rumor for you. So let me go, because it's fun. Let me go to the camera real quick, because this is probably going to blow your mind too. All right. But it's simple, folks. Okay. Oh, so high fructose corn syrup, the most evil thing in the world, right? That's what you've been told. Okay. So here's your little lesson. This is not on the test. This is for your life. Sucrose is your table sugar. It is made up of 1 molecule of glucose and 1 molecule of fructose. Everybody follow me so far? Okay. So sucrose is what percent? Sucrose is what percent glucose? This isn't a trick question. Come on. Very good. Yeah, it wasn't meant to be. Okay. High fructose corn syrup is glucose and fructose. Only it's 45% glucose and 55% fructose. That's it, folks. That's it. Yeah. And the reason they use this is because fructose is sweeter. Fructose is sweeter, so they don't have to use as much in your drinks and whatnot. But that's it. Okay? So no, it's not evil. When is it evil? When is it bad for you? What's my favorite? There you go. In excess. Very good. All right. That's it. In excess. All right. So this is a lie. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just a little bit more fructose and glucose because they don't need to use as much because the fructose is sweeter. But yeah, if you drink 8 regular Cokes a day, that's bad. Not so much because it's this, but it's a ton of calories. Yeah, I figured that. Don't worry about it. Yeah. So there's another rumor. I busted. Also, here's another thing. How many have heard of Splenda? It's in the yellow packet. All right. They tell you that's evil too. All right. Yeah, it doesn't taste all that great. Oh, that's totally different. Now you got me on, Daniel. There's aspartame. That's in the blue packet. All right. These are totally different. Okay. This is also called sucralose. All right. So in your restaurants and whatnot, this is the yellow packet. This is the blue packet. Sucralose has kind of a little bit more of a aftertaste. Samantha, it's all about acquired taste. It's all about acquired taste. You can get used to it. All right. Okay, Joshua, that's kind of weird. I normally mix one of each. Pink? God, you guys are kidding me. Who knows what pink is? Or sweet and low. Saccharin or sweet and low. Yeah. Okay. These are all very, very different, folks. All right. And again, I don't want to go too long, but I want you to know that none of these are bad. You may not like the taste, but they are not going to hurt you. All right. Let's go with Splenda or sucralose. You know what they did? They took sucrose. Oh, that's a fruit thing, and don't even get me started. Kalani, stevia is basically fructose. And remember what I said. Your cells can't use fructose. Only your liver can. All right, so and it's sweet, but it's kind of tricking you. All right, so Splenda, what they did, some genius said, I'm going to take sucrose and I'm going to add a chloride ion to it. And this is basic science. So I have an enzyme called sucralase that my small intestine has that takes sucrose and breaks it down into fructose and glucose. But enzymes are, as you should have learned, are very, very, very specific. So if there's a sucrose molecule that has a chloride to it, your sucralase enzyme doesn't recognize it. It goes, what is this stuff? So it doesn't digest it. It's sort of like how no one knows that Clark Kent is Superman because he has a pair of glasses on. You know what I'm talking about? So sucralose or sucrose has a pair of glasses called chloride. So the enzyme says, I don't know what to do with this. So let's just let it go. And so 0 calories. Aspartame is 2 amino acids, naturally occurring, aspartic acid and phenylalanine. So it's just a dipeptide, 2 of the 20 amino acids that you normally ingest, but it tricks your tongue, your taste buds. And if you had a cool MP1 instructor, he would have mentioned this. But the aspartame with the 2 amino acids tricks your taste buds into thinking it's sucrose. So that's a trick. Nothing bad. So all that stuff you heard about aspartame being bad or Splenda being, it's not. When is it bad for you? Very good. All right, beautiful. And saccharin is a derivative. It's a saccharide, so it's a sugar, but you don't have the ability to break it down, and it got a bad reputation. What do they say saccharin can cause? Cancer. What they didn't tell you, Joshua, to get cancer from saccharin, you would have to eat like a pound of it a day. So think about consuming, 2,000 pink packets a day, and then you'd have to be concerned with cancer. All right. The last evil thing that you all heard is evil. Right? Daniel, as far as I'm concerned, diet soda is infinitely better. All right? Because again, in my world, and I could give you in fact, maybe Wednesday we'll talk more about nutrition and biochemistry. All right? But the whole bottom line is calories. All right? Aspartame is not bad. Neither is Splenda, but most of your Diet Cokes and Diet Pepsis and NutraSweet are made with aspartame, which does not hurt you at all. And so a Diet Coke or a Diet, the most perfect drink in the world is a Diet Mountain Dew, because it has no sugar, no calories, but it has caffeine. I love Diet Mountain Dew. So you are spared the 200 calories in a regular Coke, and it's not going to hurt you. All right. I'm 63 years old, and I've been drinking Diet Coke for, I don't know, when did it come out? I think when I was 20. All right. And I'm still kicking. All right. Beautiful. And yeah, exactly, Joshua. No diseases. No, I know. And in fact, I just had a thorough workout, that ultrasounds and MRIs, and unless I get hit by a car or lightning, I don't take any medicines, no meds, no nothing. That's genetic too. Don't forget that. I'm just lucky. I got a couple brothers that are in a world of hurt, but that's a different story. MSG, monosodium glutamate. Yeah. Let's talk about that, because that's another ridiculous myth. All right. Yeah, it's probably the fact that I've always been a jock, and in the last 20 years, I've been doing I do a lot of cycling on a bicycle, where we do 70 to 100 miles a week. So that helps with the heart and all that stuff. But again, this is not bad for you, folks. None of these are bad for you, and they save you those calories. All right. This is all about the calories, as who said that? All right. Anyway, let me write this out, because I want you to think about this for a second. Because what's glutamate? Somebody? Anyone? Hint, hint. 1 of 20. Exactly. Very good. It's amino acid. Oops, I forgot the sodium part in there. Sorry, I'm kind of racing here for time. Monosodium, what does that mean? Come on, it's a trick question. 1 sodium. As I probably mentioned before, most of your amino acids have a negative charge. All right. Sodium is positive, so they hook up. Doesn't sound too evil now, does it? 1 amino acid and 1 sodium. All right. In fact, if you have that nice steak or even that bar of tofu and you sprinkle salt on it, guess what you made? Again, MSG, exactly. And what you should have learned in your AMP1 class is you have a taste receptor that actually is dedicated to MSG. Anybody know what it is? What's your taste receptor that is stimulated by MSG? Very good, Daniel. All right, beautiful. Umami. Umami is your taste receptor that is actually triggered by MSG. So in my world of evolution, why the hell would I have a receptor for MSG? Because it tells us it's good for us. So when is MSG bad? Very good, in excess. All right, so I hope I blew away a lot of myths about a lot of stuff today. All right, so let's finish this up. The rest of this is not a big deal. There's only one test question left here. For carbohydrates and amino acids, all you have to do is say that's a co-transport system. Don't worry about the enzymes. I'm not going to ask you about these pancreatic enzymes or brush border enzymes. That's way beyond the scope of this course. So don't worry about that. All I want you to know is they're absorbed by a co-transport system. The one that's complicated is lipids, because lipids are difficult. And so this is your study slide right here, folks. All right.
Wait, what are we looking at here?
Oh, shoot. Oh, yeah. Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Got to remind me. Okay. So as I was saying, don't worry about these enzymes down here. I'm not going to ask you about any of the what we call peptidases or proteases. I'm not going to ask you anything about the different. There's a whole bunch of them because you have 20 different amino acids with all kinds of different ways of binding. Not important. Just know this right here. Boom. And like I said, for fats, this is your study slide. This will be a test question. All right. So your fats are a little bit more complicated. You ingest the fats. First, I have the bile, which remember is an emulsifier. Combine these. I couldn't find a good one. So the bile binds to the little molecules of fat, and we call it a micelle. Since they are lipid soluble, they will go through right through the membrane. And again, so we have our little micelles. They get in here, and then your cells, there's my Golgi apparatus. Yay! It's going to combine a protein. Remember, proteins are like escorts for fats. We want to separate. We want to keep these fats separated. So I put a protein around the little fat thing, and then I get a name change to kilomicron. All right, or kilomicron. You can say it either way, as far as I'm concerned. Okay. Then the chylomicrons are transported to the basement membrane and released into the lacteals. Remember, the lacteals are part of the lymphatic system. So they will travel through the lymphatic system and ultimately be released, as you learn in the lymphatic system, into the venous side of the circulatory system between the subclavians and the brachiocephalic and whatnot. Okay? So this is your study slide. Know it, and you're good. Don't worry about nucleic acids. They're so trivial. Still active transport, co-transport. Don't worry about it. And then the last but not least, water. We want all our water back, and we just use osmosis. We use a sodium-potassium pump the sodium out, water follows. That simple. Okay. Any questions? Oh, can we wait for I was going to talk about the keto thing when we talk about your acid-base balance. Right. No, I'm going to cover it. I'm going to cover it in great detail. But we have a lecture on our acid-base balance and where we get our acids from. And that's where the keto acidosis and the keto diet comes into play. And I will talk in great depth. So Christine, if you can just hold on for that, we will talk about the keto diet when we talk about acids and bases. Okay? Tolani, what's your question?
Okay, so Professor, Saturday I work every weekend, so I don't know. I come back around for I pick up
So
my
you
kids.
work from
Yeah,
you work from 10 to 11:30 on Saturday?
I work from morning till almost evening, like end of the day.
All right. Okay, well, we'll work out something.
Thank you so much.
All right. Just text me and we'll work out a schedule for you where you're available. Okay. Anybody else have anything? Now, again, folks, all this stuff about Splenda, aspartame, saccharin, high fructose, that's none of that's on your test. That's for your knowledge so that you're not walking around like most of the public thinking all these things are evil. Any other questions about this? Okay, so Wednesday we will have a review. Please study. Please ask questions. If you don't ask questions, then I'm going to ask you questions. But this isn't me saying, okay, test review is telling you what's going to be on the test. I've already told you what was on the test. This is recorded. Go back and listen to how many times I said this is going to be on the test. Got it? Okay. Have a good night. I'll see you guys on Wednesday.